Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right, welcome back, the On the Rise podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the On the Rise podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Dyer. I've got another amazing guest with me today. I have Wayne Courreges. Wayne, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for my listening audience, Wayne is a man after my own heart. He's currently recording this podcast in his RV in Florida with his family. For those that don't know me personally in that way, my wife and I also own a RV, and we have literally traveled the country with our 4 children over the course of the last decade, and really appreciate, being able to have, that freedom and not having to be tied down to a specific occupation or, really showing up to work each day, so to speak, and grinding out the W-2. So just a little bit of information here about Wayne, and we'll kind of jump into it. So Wayne primarily focuses on acquiring apartment communities, developing build-to-rent communities, and get this, RV boat storage, which I'd like to talk a little bit more about here as well. CREI Partners currently has over $33 million in assets under management, primarily in markets located in Texas, Louisiana, and Alabama. That said, Wayne, I'm going to turn it over to you to let our audience know a little bit more about yourself, your background, your journey, what you're focused on today, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on a RV road trip. We started in August of 2025, and we will be finishing in May 2026. We've seen a lot, but we wouldn't be able to do this type of trip if it weren't for having systems and people in place. I went full-time into CREI Partners. I started the company in 2019, but we're able to go full-time into the business in 2023. And over the last 3 years, we've added, full-time investor relations, a senior portfolio manager, a brand and marketing, and an institutional partnership partner in the deal. We actually have north of 60 million assets under management. We've gone, I would say 80% of our portfolio is the value add multifamily. We've actually doubled down on multifamily. When a lot of people have left over the last few years, we've loved the less competition as we buy incredible deals. And I use that word, used to be like, no, nothing was really a good deal for a while, but people were still buying. And, we were very disciplined and, focused on, if the numbers didn't work, we didn't really fight to make the numbers work. And so now we're at a position, Jeremy, where we're buying properties that are, heavily discounted from what they were selling for a few years ago. So that's what we've been primarily doing and we'll continue doing. So we like the depreciation, we like the cash flow. And then there's a 20% of our portfolio that's development, and we're doing a multifamily development. We have an office, retail, and a hotel. We've done the 20 by 50 storage. We've done a build to rent. That's that, smaller percentage of our portfolio. It's heavily entrepreneurial based of what's needed in the area and, what our bandwidth is. But yeah, it's a bit about us, and, we're excited just to get back. Like for me, starting in May, we'll be back to our stable base. This is a chapter in our life. We're not nomads normally, but it's been a blessing to have this chapter. And real estate's been the big reason why we could do it.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And I've never gone on a several months, trip in the RV, but, we've taken several, multi-week trips in the RV, over the course of the last decade, and certainly have created a lot of memories that way, and really appreciate, your kind of background, as well as your journey, in the real estate space. And couldn't agree with you more, related to kind of where we're at, in the market cycle. And also you're kind of, you mentioned the word discipline. I love that word. You've got you can either be a disciplined real estate active owner operator or passive even, or and or you can choose to be aggressive, right? So I'd like to maybe kind of dial in a little bit on kind of disciplined underwriting. What are the two or three maybe assumptions that you refuse to get aggressive on, even when the brokers are kind of pressuring you, into submitting an LOI?
Yeah. First of all, we don't ever look at the broker numbers. I mean, there's no real good point in doing that. It Most of the deals that come to us too, Jeremy, are uh, there's not even offering memorandum just yet. They may be working on it, but the deals that are coming to us are typically not gone to market. We had one deal we bought last year that was technically on market, but we bought it because we were given the opportunity to underwrite and give a price before it officially went on the market. It was about $1 million less in purchase price that our offer was, and then someone paid full asking, and then a month or two later they came back to us because they weren't able to close, and we got it for what we initially. But outside of that, all the broker relationships we have, and we they know that once it goes on the market, we're not buying. So that's easy, right? And then if it's touching a flood zone or in a flood zone, easy. Like, no, like there's already risk in real estate. Why add Mother Nature to it? And so those are two easy no's once it goes on the market and once it hits flood zone. So once we take that out, all the deals, properties that we buy have to cash flow day one, and so it's got to be creative, especially with today's interest rates and all. And that's what I really like, is we have much better clarity of where the interest rate environment and insurance is compared to a few years ago, where I just felt like it was really frothy. And I would do an offer, somebody would come in 1 million, 2 million higher, and it just didn't make sense. So we weren't really growing at that time. Um, and it also helped. I had a day job, right? And so when I first started, my 9 to 5 paid for my 5 to 9, and so I wasn't needing to go out and do deals just to do deals and stuff. So we were patient because the numbers just didn't make sense. Obviously, I wanted to do deals, but it didn't make sense. So I would say, cash flow day one, we look at, DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. And more so, we got to make sure our capital stack is, makes sense for the deal that we're doing. We don't do any bridge debt. It's all fixed rate debt. All of our properties are fixed rate. Even in construction developments that we do, they're fixed rate, and they're construction to perm loans. I mean, we can refinance, but we choose construction to permanent loan structure just because we don't want to play chicken with the markets 3 years from now. So from that standpoint, we've stayed conservative. None of our numbers are super sexy. We'll never come out and be like, hey, we're 20% IRR or whatever. Like, our investors, we like, 2 base hit runs. I'm not in the business to do home runs. We do home runs. It's just a higher risk. And yeah, I mean, you can do higher reward, higher risk, but we've been able to cash flow and do on-time distributions. So we just look at it more so like, preservation of cash, which hopefully everybody out there is focused on. But then second, cash flow, and it doesn't have to be super sexy. I mean, it could be 3, 4, 5% cash on cash, but it's positive cash flow. It's a, fixed rate debt, and it's buying right. And for me, buying right is not buying when it goes on the market.
Yeah, it makes total sense, and I appreciate that perspective as well. And I love that you guys have this kind of non-negotiable, buy box, and you have a certain criteria of the types of deals that you're willing to transact versus not transact, and that of course capital preservation is paramount really to everything that you guys are doing there. I'd like to maybe kind of talk a little bit to that busy professional, right? That W-2, income earner. Maybe they've got a solid W-2, and they're kind of keeping up with the Joneses, and life is going along. We kind of talk about the cliche saying that the best time to get involved in real estate was 5 years ago. The next best time is today. But I'd like you to comment maybe a little bit about that. In the lens of market cycle timing, because you certainly know, and I know full well, that the market was frothy back in 21, 22. But did we know it was frothy at the time? Yeah, maybe some people did, right? But I also remember back in 2016 when everybody was screaming a recession's coming, and it never came, right? So if you sat on the sidelines from 2016 until 2021, you largely missed out on a bull run. So would love to hear maybe your kind of perspectives on that as well, Wayne.
Yeah, so I'll first off, the investors that typically are investing with CREI Partners are later in their career. They're late 40s and the 50s. They're looking at, transitioning at some point out of their W-2, but they typically are not people who hate their day job. These are high net worth individuals that love what they do, but they're about to go into a different chapter, whether that's paying, you got kids going to college, or they're becoming empty nesters. They're looking at retirement, so they are starting to look at, hey, we've got this active income, now we need to start flipping this to passive income, and then getting the cash flow, so that way we can have a choice to determine whether we're going to be able to to retire or not. It's just part of the diversification and getting the depreciation. So a lot of our investors are sophisticated. They're conservative. These are business owners or people who have been highly educated. And so they understand the markets, that there are going to be ups and downs. And honestly, there are deals in any given market. And so whether it's a frothy market or, a market we're in now, there's going to be deal flow. The people that say there's no good deals in any given market, I want them to have that mindset, because that allows me to find those deals that are out there. I'll tell you, we bought last year, another property we bought was $3 million less than they bought it for a year prior, and so, it was an opportunity. It was off market. Broker came to us direct. We've done seller financing deals. So when people say, oh, interest rates are just crazy high, well, it's like one of our deals a year prior, we did a loan assumption for 3.75 rate for a 5-year term. So, it's being creative and thinking long-term about it. But yeah, there's going to be ups and downs, just like there are in the stock market. However, it's tied to a physical asset. And this physical asset, I don't have to worry about geopolitical events across, the waters, or a tweet or a Facebook social media, whatever the social media or whatever the headline is. At the end of the day, it's really market driven. We focus heavily on San Antonio and Houston. And we're also looking at the outskirts of Austin, not Austin direct, but on the outskirts of Austin. And so these are areas where we know extremely well. We have management teams in place. We have, partner relationships. Jeremy, you also mentioned, back in 2021, 2020, people were thinking they were getting good deals. The issue then was people were using bridge debt. Bridge debt is a good resource. It allows someone to buy an underperforming asset, use a bridge loan to bridge them to more of a long-term loan. But to bridge them to a long-term loan, they need to do some type of renovation, some type of big value add. The problem is that people were getting those bridge loans without a huge value add component because they couldn't get long-term debt because the debt service coverage ratio didn't make sense. And that's what I was seeing during those times. But to get those loans approved, appraisers had to approve it, loan officers had to approve it. Obviously, the sponsor and the investors had to. So multiple people had to look at this. But, when people are using tools and resources that are out there and stretching it so that they can use it in a form that it wasn't really meant to be, that's where, it's super concerning. But how you avoid that, for the investors out there, is getting into deals that are fixed rate debt. Why, again, just on a risk standpoint, if you have fixed rate debt, you're not having to worry about all the external factors that go into rate. Like right now, I don't care about what's going on in the Fed rates and all that, up and down goes, and, all of our is fixed rate. And then when we go buy a property, Jeremy, it's just whatever the rate is at that time. That's what I'm underwriting to. And if the numbers work, great. If they don't, we just go on to the next deal. So that's sort of how we reduce our risk for our investors.
I'm Zach Haptonstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investor. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I appreciate that perspective. And of course, different debt structures, are a lot better or worse aligned with different types of business plans and risk profiles. And of course, the market cycle absolutely does, matter there. I'm aware of some, longer term fixed rate, loans of 5 to 7 years with Fannie Freddie that are now coming due, and those properties are worth 30 to 40% less today than they were when the operator bought them with fixed rate, debt, back at the peak of the last market cycle in 2020 and 2021. So anyways, either way you go there, debt is obviously a concern, and it's of course important and prudent for the operator, to really, keep their investors, top of mind. Capital preservation is paramount, but either direction that you go, there is going to be a little bit of a risk certainly involved there. When it comes to passive versus active investing, you kind of went from this active W-2 income to transitioning over into active real estate ownership. I did the same thing. The difference with me is I went from active investing to passive investing, and then I came back to active investing again. So I kind of saw both sides there. Would love to maybe get your perspective on talking to that investor that's maybe considering, hey, I think I'd rather do this myself, than just partner, with a group like yours.
Yeah, so my whole life has been active investing. I got the bug early in high school, whose girlfriend's dad was a developer, and so I saw all the benefits that real estate provide. From that standpoint, in the Marine Corps, right out of high school, 2 days out of high school, I went right in the Marine Corps. This was 2003. 2004, I bought my first single family, 2-bed, 1-bath home in 29 Palms. And so that started my real estate journey on that side. So then out of the Marine Corps, I joined CBRE and was with them for 16 years. So heavily on the asset management side. So my whole life has been focused on, my whole adult life, I should say, even in the Marine Corps, was focused heavily on commercial real estate and real estate in general. I would say for those that are thinking about getting on the active side, that this is hard. This is grit and ups and downs. If you've got a job that has ups and downs, and then you want to add this headache, I don't know. I would say don't do it. Work with people who are doing this full time, who are professionals, who have a track record and a team to do the project. For me, I've got a mindset coach, and my mindset coach one day asked me, Wayne, if you had all the money in the world, what would you be doing? And my answer was real estate. So if you don't have that answer, I would highly recommend partnering with others through a limited partnership or a co-general partnership, but I wouldn't take the lead on it, because at the end of the day, you are the jockey on the horse. You are the ones that are, ups and downs and trying to be strategic, helicopter pilot, determining, do you have the right management team in place? What capital projects are in place? Distributions, you got K1 accounting pieces. There's so many things that, go really well. And then there's things that, don't go so well. But that's okay, because as sponsors, this is our living. This is what we do. I had a cardiologist tell me recently, like 2 weeks ago, he's like, thank you so much for, doing what you do. I wouldn't be able to do what you do. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't be able to work on hearts either. Like at the end of the day, like everybody has their own place. And that stress on the real estate side would be a different stress than a life or death situation in an OR/ER room. Right. And so everybody has their place in the world. And I would just say, like, hey, unless you can answer that question of, like, if you had all the money in the world, what would you be doing? And if real estate is not your answer, maybe look at something like partnering or joining, because there are days, and I'm sure, Jeremy, you see this with Rise 48 too. It's sort of like there are portfolios that are doing well and there's portfolios that suck. And it's like, how do you grit through it? And, we all have those properties, and so anyway, it's a long answer, but I would say really, especially when you're working with other people's money, be mindful of partnering first, at least.
I'd like to double click on that comment there, if you don't mind. We always kind of talk about that you're investing in the jockey, right? Not in the horse. That's kind of a cliche saying, in the space. When I determine whether or not to deploy my own personal capital into a deal, historically, I'm looking at kind of three main risk factors, right? I'm looking at operation risk, I'm looking at execution of the business plan risk, and then I'm looking at market risk, right? The things that none of us can control, but we can certainly mitigate, against and solve for. But as it relates to the jockey specifically, okay, I've now that I've been involved in 65 different investment opportunities with dozens of sponsors, a half a dozen different asset classes over the last, decade and a half. I now am more dialed in and laser focused on doing diligence on the operator's heart. I know that kind of sounds interesting there, but I care far more today about the heart of the operator, trust, integrity, authenticity, transparency, right? All those things to me as an investor are far more important than their track record, than their pitch deck, right? How well they craft an email, how well they articulate themselves in an investor presentation. Those things, the heart of the operator, doing diligence on that is by far the most important, metric that I now look at today, having been a passive investor, over the last 15 years. So we'd love to maybe get your commentary on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, the commentary you said is not much to add to that, because finding the heart, but that goes with like the passion and love for real estate, because there's going to be ups and downs. That's okay. You just want to sell when it's up. At the end of the day, there's going to be valleys, right? But depending on your debt structure and your cash flow and et cetera, you can do risk mitigants, and that's where the sponsor comes into play. And as I said earlier in this conversation, like, we don't go out and do home runs. Like, we want to do two base hits. Two base hits wins the game. It's, for us, that's our comfort level. But I'd also say this too: if you've got a sponsor who hasn't had a black eye in their career, they haven't been in real estate long enough, right? And so we've all had black eyes. What did you learn from it? What was the transparency of the communication with investors? We all have, at least one property that has aged us 20, 30 years. And that's okay, because those lessons learned need to be communicated on, what you're doing differently moving forward, right? And it's interesting. I have I have a lot of cardiologists that invest with us. I had one cardiologist. We were talking about a deal we've partnered on, and it hasn't gone, extremely perfect as we say. And I just gave him the analogy. It's like, not every heart surgery goes exactly as planned, right? You're never going to bat 100, but it's like, how did you learn? How did you, figure out what can be done differently, right? And at the end of the day, we're in this to make money and to grow wealth for all of us and our investors. The biggest compliment, though, is when you have repeat investors and have people who are willing to recommend you to other, the friends and family alongside. But everything you mentioned about heart, and last thing I'll say, I can go on and on about this, but we have what we call ridge values in our company, and we've got a team of staff, full-time employees. And our ridge values is respect, integrity, dependability, grit, and execution. Each one of those I've chose as a value because it's necessary to be successful in commercial real estate. And grit is, that is a huge one, and you want to see that in the heart of any jockey that's running your investments.
Yeah, appreciate that perspective, and it's great that you have a core, set of values that you guys operate, by and under, as an organization. As we kind of wrap up here, I just have to ask the question about the RV and boat storage. Of course, I'm a renter, I'm a renter of an RV, storage facility, with our own, RV. I'm also invested in a boat marina, through a syndication. So we'd love for you to maybe kind of let our audience know a little bit more about kind of what, trends you're seeing in the RV boat storage space specifically.
Yeah, I'm not it's funny, I'm not a subject matter expert on the boat and storage. The reason why, so we partnered on a deal in Huntsville, Alabama, and that is all 20 by 50. It's fully enclosed, high-end RVs, boats, business storage, personal. These are large units, 1,000 square feet, with a 14 by 14 foot roll-up door. There's a walk-in door as well. There's power, there's lighting. I don't like mini storage. I think that's easy, entry to a market is pretty easy for a mini storage. These larger warehouse, it's a little harder to build, more equity involved, and just a different business plan. But there are 60-foot drive lanes between buildings. So if you look at mini storage, just the door height or the distance of the drive lanes wouldn't be able to support a trailer or a big RV. So I like the niche. We built one in Bryan, Texas, and we're at 75% occupancy right now. It's been a year and a half. And so I'm proud of that. That for us, that's about 55,000 square feet. We've leased 55,000 square feet or 55 units of the 72. I think my math's right, about 75% occupied. But that to me is, a testament of like, hey, this is a strong product. Now, for me to go build these outside of the market, I don't know. I mean, for us, we really develop in Bryan College Station because that's our backyard. We're doing the hotel, we're doing the office retail and the multifamily. There'll be other projects that we develop. But on my 9-month trip, whenever you see a nice RV, there's a nicer one next to it. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy. People spend a lot of money on these, and they're not parking them in their driveway because of HOA and other reasons, protection. And so I think it's going to be definitely a growing sector as people have disposable income and growing.
Yeah, totally agree with you 100% there. Wayne, I really appreciate the tremendous value that you brought our listening audience today. What would maybe be one or two different ways that we can connect with you offline?
Yeah, so for me, I'm just really educational focused. The value I can give is helping people learn about syndications and knowing whether they're investing with us or other people that they're asking the right questions. So I do these podcasts for that reason. But we have a free passive investor coaching program. It's passiveinvestorcoaching.com. There's no sales pitch or anything. It's just straight up, about 5 hours of content that I go from A to Z on passive investments. So if someone's out there like trying to just download as much information, it's sort of hard to find. There's not a lot of content out there for passive investing. So that's why I created passiveinvestorcoaching.com. Again, it's free, and hopefully will be used for those that want to accelerate their path. The other thing too is you go to CREIPartners.com. There's a Let's Talk button. You can click on that, put in your info, and we'll set a time to connect with our investor relations team and build the relationship.
Yeah, that sounds great, Wayne. Well, we'll definitely put those links in the show notes for the episode. Again, thanks so much for bringing value to our audience today.
Jeremy, thank you for your time, and appreciate all you and Rise 48 do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the On the Rise podcast. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.